James Gray is back with his newest movie, Armageddon Time. And no, it's not a sequel to Armageddon, the infamous sci fi flick with Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis. No, it's a more of a coming of age film. And since we are in the Oscar season right now, it definitely has a lot of buzz going on about its Oscar potential. So I got a special guest with me, my movie time buddy Blake, who also watched this movie as I saw it during New York Film Festival, and we have a chance to finally talk about it. So let's talk about Armageddon Time.
You're gonna be a mensch, okay? Firm handshake. Okay, give me a hug.
All right, so Armageddon Time. So this is a movie from James Gray. Last outing he had was Ad Astra, I believe it was.
Yep.
Is that right?
Brad Pitt.
Right. And I think if you follow James Gray and you happen to know his experiences with making that movie, that was one of the movies where he was not very happy with. I think he's publicly spoken about how the studio meddled so much in it, and it didn't, at the end of the day, it didn't really feel like his own. So having a chance to watch Armageddon Time, now you feel like this is definitely a passion project of his, something that he was really all into, and he had his hands and fingers and whatever the case is wrapped all around this movie. I was able to catch this movie at New York Film Festival. I know you are always happy when I bring that up.
Yeah.
But
right, a little bit.
but it was definitely one of those movies that is perfectly tailored for a New York Film Festival crowd. It is, I guess, a semi-autobiographical movie, you know, something that he's taken from his life and his personal experiences and all that. So in that aspects, I thought it was a really nice movie. It flowed very well. The acting and the performances are really phenomenal, especially the two kids, Michael Banks Repeta, who plays Paul, Jaylin Webb, who plays Johnny. I thought their performances were phenomenal and fantastic. But I also saw this as a nice little love letter to New York, especially Queens, New York, you know, where I grew up. And I know you've lived some years in Queens and all that.
6 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Near 7 Boulevard, where, no spoilers, but the pawn shop scene happened.
There you go. Yeah, which is fantastic. And of course, one of the major moments of the movie was taking place in Flushing Meadows, which is a park that I hang out in all the time. And you know, growing up in Queens in the 80s, I mean, this was definitely that like kind of nod to that period in that time, you know. And I think for me personally, I really love that aspect of it too. I love the fact that you know, the whole thing about him having to take the subway at that age going to school. I experienced that myself, which is like very uncommon during that time, right? So I knew how that felt. I knew the anxiety, the differences, and also growing up again at that time, there was some, you know, prejudices, you know, like around, especially with your religion or how you look, your ethnicity and all that. So a lot of those things that they covered in this movie pretty much rang home to me. Like it was very something that I experienced as well growing up at the time. Plus, you know, the environment is changing, right? Because we're moving from the 70s to the 80s. Everything's changing. Music is changing. Fashion's changing, and politics are changing, right? Because we're now heading into the Reagan era that kind of, you know, some will say, started a lot of the messes that we're experiencing these days and all that. But no, I thought it was a very well done movie, and I really, really enjoyed it. I never thought there was a moment where it felt dull or it felt dragging. I was pretty much engaged all throughout. And I think that's mainly because of the performances and the directing. And we could talk about like the performances in a little bit, but Blake, how did you feel about this movie? And you saw it in like a regular theater setting, right?
Yes, I saw it at an AMC last night, and I overall really enjoyed it. I am a sucker for like a well-directed indie drama. This didn't feel like Oscar bait. This felt very like hard on its sleeve and personal. And this is an expert level director who's very critically acclaimed. So I enjoyed the directing of it, and as long as it's not just like, because those movies honestly they piss me off, like Oscar bait, phone it
Right.
in, indie drama stuff. This one was much more than that, and I feel like it earned the acclaim that it has so far. We're looking at like 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, which it's not going to be a movie for everybody, for sure.
Right.
Which I took a buddy with me, and all I know is we're looking for movies. That was the main one I hadn't seen that was out in theaters, and I was like, "How about Armageddon Time?" They said they looked at it. They said that looks great. Let's go see it. 20 minutes in the movie, they lean over. They go, "What is with this movie?"
What?
I go, "What are you talking about?" They go, "Nothing's happened." I go, "Yeah, it's just like a slow indie movie."
Yeah.
And then about 20 more minutes later, they go, "What is going on?"
Really?
I go, "What?" They go, nothing's happening. I go, "The camera work is happening. There's great acting. What are you talking?" I was like, honestly, like a little annoyed. They go, "We dropped it." They ended up enjoying the movie, but afterward, they explained what was happening. They thought it was an Armageddon apocalypse movie. And they just go, "That movie was misnamed. That was a terrible choice for the name of this movie." And I don't think they thought it was a sequel to the Ben Affleck, Bruce
Right,
Willis
right.
Armageddon, which is obviously a lovely joke to make about this movie. It's the prequel or something. But no,
Right.
they just kept thinking it was like where the zombie's going to come, there's going to be an earthquake, the world's going to run out of
Wow.
currency or something, like when everything's going to get dark. Quiet Place. No, it was quiet, but it was not an apocalypse movie
Oh
by
my
any
God.
means.
That's crazy.
I thought that was hilarious. I literally gave him so much shit after. I was like, "You didn't want to look at the trailer, you didn't read the plot." Like, no, I just saw the title and the poster and decided, yeah, that looks fun. I wanted an action movie tonight. So if you're looking for a fun romp at the movies, it's not this one. This is a well-told Bildungsroman coming of age. Not,
Yeah.
it's like a prepubescent coming of age kind of
Yeah.
movie.
Mhm.
And it's this young boy who's kind of lost in the world, doesn't know where he fits, but has some dreams, and kind of like that age where you're just now getting your identity and how you
Mhm.
interact with other people, what your values are, etc. So that's kind of the part. I thought it was, you're right, really well acted by those two kids, which can make
Yeah.
or break a movie like this for sure. Those are my main thoughts overall, and I don't know if there's anything, if you want to talk about the Curtis Blow of it all, or the Donald Trump of it all. I don't know if you want to get into any of that stuff, but I don't think there's much to say other than just like really well directed.
Yeah.
Not a ton to analyze, just on the surface, like lovely, beautiful family coming of age type movie.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you brought up the like a prepubescent coming of age movie, because they're at that age where there's still that level of innocence, but now the world and reality is starting to open up, right, for you, and you're understanding this is the dynamics of the world, this is the dynamics of social, societies and all that, and you're learning that for the very first time, and you're trying to figure out, okay, where does one fit in, especially myself, where do I fit in on this, like who do I believe in, who do I accept, who do I resonate more with, who am I, basically it's just, that's when you start asking all those questions. Here's a boy who loves art, he loves drawing and all that, and he has a very encouraging grandfather who is trying
Anthony
to.
Hopkins, we got to
Oh my
mention,
God, yeah,
really, really good. Which of course he's good. This was even good for Anthony Hopkins, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah. This was a fantastic performance by Anthony Hopkins, and he was the one person within the family that was basically telling him, do what you want to love, do what you love, and don't back down. Don't agree because you hear this person say something, or don't do something because you're being told this. Use your gut and your feeling to do what you want to do and live your life and all that. And and it's one of those things where it's also, you think of families during that time, especially families of immigrants and all that. They always think about hard work. You got to study, you have to do things that will make you money and make you successful and all that. So here's this kid who wants to be an artist, and that becomes like a big question and all that. So But yeah, overall, especially like when the movie ended, it made you feel good at the end, because it just was one of those really touching kind of stories. Again, with the backdrop of Queens, New York, right there. But yeah, there were some things in this movie that were creative choices, I think, and it was nice hearing him talk about it after the screening. When James Gray was able to
Oh,
do a
where
small
did you
Q
see
and
him
A.
talk about it? You got to
New
see a director
York,
Q&A?
yeah, it was New York Film Festival.
Damn
If
it.
you
You
heard
got
of
to
it,
go to
yeah.
that. Fuck
Yeah, it
me.
was James Gray and Jeremy Strong. Yeah, so it was no Anne Hathaway. Oh, I have to say this. All right, let's talk about some of the performances. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So first of all, Anthony Hopkins, I do think this is going to lead him to another nomination.
Ooh, hot take.
Yeah,
Okay. I like
yeah,
it.
I really,
After he
I
beat Chadwick Boseman, you think the Oscars want to revisit that territory?
I
That
mean,
was a fun night.
performance is a performance, right? And and it's like the supporting actor category. I don't know. We could like probably dissect all the movies that have been out so far,
Oh,
and
we've got time to get into Oscar stuff. There's no way we
definitely
can do that right now, but we are in the
no.
heat. We are
We
in
are
the final lap of Oscar season. I'm hyped for the
definitely,
next couple of
and
months.
it's exciting. It's a great time to be in. But I would say like his performance is that strong. Like I really do feel like
Yeah.
it could lead to that. And if you watch the movie, you know why. Like he is the heart of this movie in an essence. He is like the guiding light for this little boy and the bonding factor within the family dynamic. And then spoiler alert, when he's gone, you could see where there is starting to be now not turmoil, but a little, separation of like those things that he would teach and kind of that little cracks in the foundation of the family, and especially with the young boy, he feels it totally 100%, right? But Jeremy Strong, I think he was really good in this movie too, playing the father in this role. Anne Hathaway. Now, my
Jeremy
hot.
Strong, I just got a
Oh,
Succession. One of
sure, please go
my
ahead.
current favorite TV show. Absolutely agree. Loved him. It was really nice
Yeah.
seeing him on the big screen. Last time I remember seeing him on the big screen like that was Big Short. I'm sure he's had a couple other
Oh
things,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he's amazing. Yeah. What's your Anne Hathaway take? Where's this going?
So here's my Anne Hathaway take. Okay. Um, when she first came out on the scene, I thought, oh, look, here's a refreshing actress. She's doing she's doing that Princess Diaries movie or whatever the case is, and then Devil Wears Prada comes out, and like oh, this is pretty cool. And then she does Les Mis, and then during this time when she's doing
Or
Les
La
Mis and all that,
Miss.
oh,
Because there's
Les
a big old
Mis.
miss. There's a big hit or missed. Okay, yep.
I felt like she was becoming one of those pretentious actresses. And I felt like, where she would just one of those actresses just all about themselves, all about, their performance, and everything has to be so perfect. She gets a little carried away at the Oscars and at the ceremonies, and everything has to be about her. Look at me, I can be quirky and funny too. Da 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 da. All that stuff like that. And I'm starting to feel that with a lot of her acting after that period and all that. Now, here's when
mom role. Okay,
I
because
think
she's now
so.
transitioning from that
Yes,
earlier stage you're talking about. Or
exactly.
like one of her first, at least. Interesting. Okay, sorry,
Right.
keep going.
So she's playing an like a motherly figure, someone who's more mature, older. And my fear was that, is she gonna be trying to steal the screen every time she's on? Is this pretentious actress gonna be like overboard and overwhelming? And she wasn't. And that's one of the things,
Okay.
yeah, that's one of the things that I was really refreshed with. I was like, for me, maybe this might have been Anne Hathaway's, best performance in some time, maybe right now. The fact that, you believed her as a mom. You believed her in like trying to always care for this little boy and like, but still trying to keep the family together and everything like that. Trying to do right by the husband and by, uh again, you have to think of it at the time that this movie takes place in, like in the 80s. Like these are how moms were, and I did find it funny how she happened to be president of the PTA and all this stuff like that, and how the son is like, well, she can do everything, right, because she's the president. And how he has like this view on her and all that. But I actually really appreciated her performance in this movie. I thought in this film she did a really, really good job. And like, it goes to what we said before, all the performances in this film is strong. Like there wasn't one person that would like, I could say like, oh, I wish this person wasn't in this film, or whatever the case is. Like everyone was really, really well. They acted really well, and they were very well directed too. But as far as like some of the creative choices, so because it's the 80s and because it's a specific school, private school, he chose to have a Trump representing the school and kind
So,
of
do you
be
mind
like,
if
yeah.
do you mind if I throw it on the Anne Hathaway of it all?
Oh,
And then,
please go for it.
I'll
Yeah,
transition right into this because
yeah,
I'm fascinated by this
yeah.
choice. But um, so Anne Hathaway, she gets a bad rap for being the try-hard actress who just like wants to be serious
Mhm.
and kind of like the very type A, wound up a little tight kind of thing. I've heard
Yeah.
other people say that about her, and there is something. There's one take on that where that's not fair to just say because of just how she comes across, or it rubs us the wrong way of they're just
Sure.
like a little too. So she has a really interesting career, and honestly to me she's fascinating because I don't like a lot of her performances, to be
Hmm.
perfectly frank. But she's also been all over the place where she's done Devil
Yeah.
Wears Prada and Brokeback Mountain. She
Right.
did Ocean's 8 since Les Mis, Interstellar.
Batman.
Um, she gets nominated for Rachel Getting Married. Batman, yep, that's a big one. And then, but it's also doing stuff like Valentine's Day, right?
Hmm.
Prince Diary. So, I'm very curious about her career. I like the idea of her becoming maturing as a star
Yep.
and getting rid of some of the weight of a young, very famous, but how great of an actor are they kind of like
Hmm.
whatever. How I feel like that would be annoying to feel like you have to live up to this potential, and also act cool or play it natural and be hosting the Oscars, whatever. It makes sense to me that she could mature into maybe a great actress.
Hmm.
It also makes sense that this is a great role for her because it's a try-hard PTA mom who cares so
Right.
much about her son.
Yeah.
And then I'll just use that as like transitioning to this is actually set not far from where I was living when I was in Queens at Q4 school, the
Hmm.
school where it's at. And this is where a bunch of famous people have gone, but we're including Marianne Trump and Donald Trump were also went to the school that this director went to.
Yep.
The politics seep into this movie. I feel personally like it didn't hit you over the head with it, but there's a few lines and a few things that you can go, is this director reckoning with politics in America today through that lens, but
Mhm.
also showing you what it was really like. So, but yeah, I interrupted you. What was I know you were going into
No,
that
no, no,
territory.
no, please. Yeah, no, no, not an interruption at all. No, I just found it really interesting how, again, small world, right? Especially like growing up in New York, and the Trumps were big in New York. I mean, obviously they still kind of are, but one of the things that he said during his Q&A was like, there was no way he could not at least include that aspect in the movie because that was a part of his life. That was a part of his growing up, and he was very much exposed to that. And I think that's also what led to some of his life choices or growing up, just like, again, figuring out who you are, figuring out who you stand with, figuring out who you believe. When you have such like a huge influence like the Trumps in this one school, you have Ronald Reagan, running for president. You see like there is this political shift happening in the world. You have your home, your family at home calling Reagan an moron, an idiot, and like all this stuff. So it's like all these conflicting things. And as a young boy, you're trying to figure out, okay, so what do I believe? Who do I stand with? What am I gonna do when I get to that point? So I you're right. it wasn't like overbearing. It wasn't just like being hammered into your head. But there are certain aspects in there that would come up. There's certain things that would come up that kind of speak to what we're going through these days. But again, it's one of those things where history is there repeating itself, or the foundations were being laid back then that is now coming into fruition now, right? And I think the 80s was huge because of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's telling a personal history, but that includes history. And when you're talking about that age in your life, this is when you start to realize the world is a bigger place. And at some point, he asks, Mom, are you the president of the school? Which is kind of like the old thing when a kid doesn't have perspective. They go, does the teacher live at the school? What do you mean she goes home? She's my teacher. She's always in the classroom. And like, you're starting to realize like, oh, these homes are connected. Other people live there. Other people are making the rules. My dad isn't God. Like, you're trying to like figure out my relation to the people above me, the people above them, etc. And it did a really good job of that. And it's doing some 2022 lens reconciling with the political past of America, this neighborhood. Queens in particular is a very fascinating place. To me, it's the most diverse area in the entire world, or at least right up there, of any urban city, of like different people being put next to each other. And you also have some of the most old school conservative folks in Queens, and like the Trump family's from there in the Jamaica Estates area, and there's some really wealthy areas and some very not wealthy areas. This is, and it's a nice time to set it, or at least it's like the director really went back in time, because it's got 1980, you've got the end of disco, you've got Curtis Blow coming up, you've got Trump was in his high school, or in his school not too long before. And the Reagan thing, and his family's a certain way, and at some point all the kids are chanting Reagan,
Right.
and like there's just this fervor around him, which is happening in the country in a way at that time. But it was, if a movie is too obvious about it's trying to get a message across, it can be annoying even if you agree with the message. But there's some lines where at some point the dad is giving a speech to the son. I'm not going to go spoilers, but is giving a speech to the son. He's going, today we got really, really lucky. And he's talking about the relationship between the son, who's a white kid or a Jewish kid in Queens, and a black kid. And the son basically like, the dad is acknowledging white privilege. So to avoid spoilers, we'll say that. And then there's moments where this kid is trying to figure out like, I don't know. It did a good job of showing the personal in relationship to the political and the world around him, and this is a smart age to tell that kind of story. I was moved by the movie overall. Not a lot really happened, right? He got in trouble a couple times. He kind of found himself, and like, I think, and I'll avoid spoilers here, but essentially at the end of the movie, he kind of goes, "Oh, I'm going to go this route and not that route."
Right.
And that's essentially like, if there's a plot at all, or like what's the big mystery here? It's like, did he go down this road or that road? And it was nice knowing that, and I think it also helps going into the movie knowing that it's about the director, because then you go, okay, I appreciate this more, as it's kind of a double story. It's a story being told by the person who's making that same story. So yeah. Right. Overall, if any of that interests you, the listener, definitely check it out. It was a very well done version of that kind of Oscar movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, going back to some of the things you touched, Queens, especially in the 80s, you talk about diversity. They cover that. The family and himself is Jewish, right? You have him going to public school. So, of course, he's hanging out with, Latinos, Hispanics, Black people, all that stuff like that. He befriends a Black boy, and it was funny. You also learn about kind of like the social hierarchies, right? Because the boy's like, oh yeah, my family's rich, we have money, so if you need me, I can pay for you to go to this field trip that we're going to. Because the Black boy is like, he comes from a poorer family, he lives in Hollis, Queens, and of course, if you knew Hollis, Queens back then, that was definitely one of the poorer neighborhoods and all that, and just hearing all that, and it's for someone who is from here, who's obviously still lives here, like I knew and understood where they're coming from immediately, because I grew up with the same, type of kids. I grew up, being exposed to all these different type of families and all that. So this is definitely a great movie for a New Yorker or someone who may be new to New York and had or lived in New York for some time, because you do get to understand and relate to a lot of these things that's happened during that time. Um, but yeah, like the big impacting moment really is that end where, he has that talk with his dad, and the dad talks about being lucky, talking about white privilege, and also like talking about like dealing with authority, right? And influences.
Oh yeah.
It
We're all
speaks a
just trying
lot
to
about that stuff.
survive.
Right. Yeah. And it's just
And life isn't fair,
right.
I wish it was. It's the worst thing in the world, he says. And he's not
Yeah.
like, the dad doesn't say the words right, white privilege,
No.
right? That phrase
No.
didn't exist in 1980.
Yeah.
But he's talking about the concept of fair treatment towards you,
Yeah.
towards a friend, whatever. And it's there. It's the if the director was speaking in 2022 language and looking at the audience and saying, "Hey, we all agree, right? Racism is bad," it would feel cornier than this. This felt like a very authentic and earned moment between a father and a son who'd had a hard time relating before that, and the dad gives him a little speech at the end, and levels with the kid. It's not the same. It's totally different circumstances, but it almost reminds me of like Call Me by Your Name, where there's a beautiful moment between a father and the son, and the father gives a speech at the end of the movie, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna level with you. Let's just call it like it is.
Right.
And it's not necessarily even a pep talk. It's just like a "you're gonna be okay, kid" kind of moment.
Right. Yeah.
But you have to read into it to see what the director might be saying about politics today. But he is doing where he's connecting all of that, which is essentially what the movie is doing, of taking the boy from "my mom is the president of the school, I don't know what those words even necessarily mean," to like, okay, we're now in a world where there is a history and there's something to look back at and say, oh, that happened to me, that was important, that mattered.
Yeah. And I thought it was also very touching, and when he basically asked his dad, so what's gonna happen to Johnny? And the dad has to be as real and brutal as honest as possible, right? He's like, well, I don't know, but basically he could either go to jail.
You're never going to see him again.
Or you're never going to see him again.
Yeah, you're probably never going to see him again.
Yeah. And that's so heart-wrenching and breaking, especially at that age, because that's when you form bonds with people too, right? And the bond with these two were very close. And then just to have that taken away because of an incident and because of the social dynamics and all that within the world at the time, it can, lead to formulating a certain idea or just a way of life for anyone, right? So that's why at the end of the movie, when he finally makes a choice of what he's going to do, now you understand how he got to that point, right? And all that. So it's again a really well done movie. Like Blake said, not a lot of stuff happens in this movie, but you are just basically following along the life of this boy growing up in Queens, dealing with his family, dealing with people around him, and all that. But a great, I guess you could call it a period piece, right? Because it does take place in the 80s, right? Yeah. Lovely backdrop there. So if this is something that speaks well to you, I think you would definitely appreciate a movie like this, if not just for the acting alone and for the performances and the way that the movie was directed, because it was such a well done. It is probably one of the more better indie type of movies that I've seen in some time, if not at least for this year, right? I mean, obviously, if you are familiar with the channel, we talked so much about Everything Everywhere All at Once and all these other like great indie movies that came out this year. But I would probably put this up there close to the top 5 of the movies of the year so far for me. And we have so many more other movies coming out before the year closes. But with that being said, any final thoughts on this movie, Blake?
I think that's about it. I gave it, I think, 4.5 stars probably. It's right up there. I'm sure we're gonna be talking about this more in the coming months when we get into Oscar season and award season. So I'm excited for that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter at all what we think. What matters most is what all of you think. Is Armageddon Time a movie you've been dying to check out, or maybe just somewhat curious about? let us know in the comments. If you've seen it already, definitely let us know your thoughts and feelings about the movie. We love having discussions with all of you, and that's one of the main reasons why we do this. We like talking to each other about movies and film and all that, but we love to talk about others and share experiences and talk about how we feel about certain films when they come out. So let us know in the comments. If you're brand new to this channel, hit that like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you are an audio listener, thank you so much for listening. If you want an audio version of this, you could find it on your podcast platform of choice. Just type in LOWKEY GEEK there, where you can download this and other episodes directly from there. That being said, thank you for watching. This has been Blake. This has been Renee. This has been Armageddon Time. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace out, y'all.
I'm getting out of here.